Thank you for tuning in and checking out the show. As always, we'll get some calls in a little bit later on in this hour, but right now we're going to speak with a former guitarist of Alice Cooper's band, who is once again a member of Alice Cooper's band. Joining me now live on the phone is Kane Roberts. Hey, Kane, how are you?
Hey, Eddie, great to talk to you. Finally.
I know.
We saw each other at, was it Chiller Theater? It was an autograph signing thing. That was the first time I ever met you, and I'm glad to finally be talking to you. It's awesome.
Yeah, I know we met there, and that was the first time I met you, which is crazy given that we've both been doing this a long time, and it was great meeting you there, and I know we talked about eventually getting around to doing some stuff, and then this news comes out that you're rejoining Alice, and I said, well, what a great opportunity to discuss and talk about that a little bit. So I guess, Kane, we'll just jump right in on it. How did you expect the call to come when Nita Strauss announced her departure from the band? Had you been talking to Alice about it, or was it somewhat of a surprise?
Well, it was a surprise. I mean, but, as you might know, I recorded an album called The New Normal, and I had Alice and Alyssa White-Gluz from Arch Enemy on one of the songs. So Alice and I, had been in touch. We've been hanging out and stuff like that. And then recently I've been writing with him and Bob Ezrin, and then I'm sitting there staring at a wall. I'm not doing anything. I'm like drooling, and the phone rings, and it's Cheryl Cooper, Alice's wife, and she says, Alice wants to talk to you. And, of course, Alice always sings this song to me when he says hi to me on the phone. It's kind of inside baseball, but it's pretty ridiculous. And then he said, do you want to play with the band? We're going to do a fall tour. We'd love to have you join. I didn't know Nita had left. So I was kind of of course I said yes. And Eddie, it's really funny when something like that happens, like this huge legend calls you, even though he's my friend, you still have the feel for that. Along with the other stuff that I have to do, I'm thinking to myself, what's the lifeblood of this whole thing? And it's along with all the hard work I have to do, I'm thinking, the audience, like that's the responsibility, because whether there's, lovers or haters or people that don't give a fuck about you, when you get up on stage, you got to work hard for all of them. It's an honor to be up there. So, that sort of storm or jet stream just kind of hit me while I was on the phone with Alice. So it was a big fucking deal.
Yeah. Now you clearly, it sounds like, have maintained a great relationship with Alice. I know every time I've spoken with him about your period of time in the band in the 80s, he's been very, very complimentary, and he said he has great fond memories of that period and making those records that you were a part of, Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell. Talk about your relationship with Alice in the decades you've not worked with him and not been a member of the band. Clearly, you've been on good terms with him, and you guys have always remained close.
Yeah, we've always remained friends. I mean, and there's no other way. I've mentioned this before, so I don't want to go through old crap. But the thing is that when I went down to meet them, when I first got the call, 100 years ago, I drove down there. And I met Bob Ezrin. We were at this high-rise building in Manhattan. And, of course, Bob has this big chair and this desk and the skylines behind him in a picture window. And, of course, I think they gave me like a lawn chair. You know what I mean? I was like looking up at him like the Wizard of Oz. So, he gave me sort of the riot act. And then I go in there, and, it's Shep Gordon, all these big guys and the entourage and Alice. And literally within 5 minutes, Alice and I became best friends. We were just laughing constantly. And I think that had a lot to do with why I got the gig. I mean, first of all, he just came out of rehab. He had all that going. And I wasn't, fucking around with any drugs or anything like that. So I think that helped. And then, of course, the music and the friendship. And we became real friends. So in that space of time that you're talking about, we would occasionally hang out, or we would do little projects together, or I'd say, hey, do you feel like doing this or that? And we just hung out. It was it was mostly just social, and it wasn't until about 3 or 4 years ago that we actually started thinking about writing and playing together. And right now I'm writing with him, and I'm going to go in the studio, relatively soon with him. So it sort of percolated very slowly to where we are right now.
When you look back on the two records that you made with Alice Cooper, they were significant because it was Alice beginning to mount his comeback, if you will, which of course would culminate with a record that you weren't on the entire record, but you did contribute to the record Trash. But when you look at the records prior to that, the records that you kind of helped bridge that gap, and certainly that was when MTV was a huge thing, and the videos and the stuff you did with Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell. How do you feel about those records in retrospect? How do you feel about your contributions to working with Alice at that point?
Well, the Constrictor record was odd in one sense. I know Bo Hill was the producer. And Alice and I wanted to use, there was this friend of mine, this guy Anton Fig. He's a fantastic drummer. He actually was the drummer on the David Letterman show. So we had him come in, and that was my choice. I think Bo was looking for something a little bit tighter in terms of what the schedule was and everything, and we ended up using a drum machine guy, which to me is completely antithetical to metal or hard rock. So, we punched our way through that, but we also had a feeling like we were going to work together. We were going to continue to work together because some of the songs are still some of our favorites, like Life and Death of the Party and stuff like that. So when the second album came along, actually not the second album, when the first tour came along, I said, look, I don't want people, or we shouldn't want people to think you survived rehab. We need to have like a nuclear Alice kind of show up. And with bands like Ozzy and Van Halen and the bands that were out there now that were just fucking smoking it, I said, we have to sort of step into that realm. So, my job was to keep my eye on sort of the incredible essence of the classic Alice stuff, which is kind of amazing music. And then just sort of upgrade it, or not in terms of quality, but in terms of the sound and everything. So I think once we came off that first tour, which was sort of a metal version of Alice, we hit the ground running and just nailed that Raise Your Fist and Yell album. It's pure metal. And what's amazing, Eddie, is that Alice is able to, Shep will say to him, I want you to do this tonight. Or he'll get a gig and he's supposed to do something. He always delivers. And I never felt like anything we were doing was above him. He always soared above everything we were doing in terms of his performance. So, you listen to some of the vocals on that record or some of the live vocals, he's fucking killing it, and he's pulling us along with him.
Did you guys immediately, what's also significant, Kane, is on those records you made with Alice, not only do you play the guitar, but you also co-wrote pretty much every song. I know Kip Winger, who was a part of the band, contributed some, especially on the second record, but did the writing partnership come together quickly with Alice? It's one thing to jump in and be his guitarist and really marketed as his right-hand guy at that time, but as far as writing and clicking as songwriters, did that come pretty naturally?
Yeah, it kind of was the job description from day one, and I think what they were looking for is somebody to work with Alice on a number of levels. I think they felt they could get a lot of guitar players, but whoever sat down with Alice and started working, they needed first of all to have kind of, I would say, a safer environment in terms of somebody that's not going to. And by the way, I won't mention any names, but he had worked with some other guys. But if they were drinking or if they were doing anything like that, it kind of turned it got uncomfortable. So our ability to hang with each other and write with each other just seemed like a natural flow in terms of what we were doing. And by the way, the reason why they called me down is, there was this guy named Don Passione from Screen Gems Publishing that handed them a demo of my writing, and Ezrin saw something in it. So I think that the main focus was for me to write with him, and if I could play guitar, that would be, just be sort of like icing on the cake, that sort of a thing.
Kane, we know that after your time with Alice Cooper, you did some solo records, I know, but overall, in the last, whatever it's been, 30 years, I think to a lot of fans, you've been pretty out of the public spotlight as far as being a musician and playing and touring or joining another band. Can you give us, like in a nutshell, some of the things you've done in the time since you were originally in Alice Cooper to now?
Well, yeah, it's funny. The industry changes with culture. I mean, the first time you heard Led Zeppelin, the first time that first album came out and sort of killed it, the shelf life begins. The clock starts ticking, and the culture is going to change, and that will no longer be the most viable thing out there. So, right after my stint with Alice, I went in and I did a Geffen record called Saints and Sinners, and that was kind of when, the whole Nirvana thing moved, and the culture was moving in a different direction. So the sound they were searching for, it changed. I mean, I don't blame Nirvana. It's just the way of things. People and listen, if people wanted to keep hearing that sort of 80s hard rock sound, if the demo was still there and still viable, then it would have survived through that. So. There's a lot of talk about that, and of course there's a lot of, aspects to it that I'm not touching upon. But for me, when that happened, well, what was I going to do? I was like standing there looking at bands like Pantera going, this is fucking unbelievable. It's blowing my head off, but I wasn't about to shave my head and put on shorts and do all that. So I sort of became an observer. I fell off the grid. And, the music business itself, to me, was not something that was really attractive. All the suits and the money and all the shit, that happens, and it has nothing to do with sort of the creative push that musicians live for. I mean, there's so many musicians out there that'll play for free. I'm one of them. You know what I mean? So I think what happened was during that time, I got into other creative things, mostly visual stuff. There was a time there I was executive producer of a broadcast design company. We had commercials on the Super Bowl and all that stuff. But I got to be honest with you, I was playing guitar through all of it, and I was observing. I was seeing these fucking amazing guitar players out there. We know their names, Paul Gilbert and Zach and all those guys. So I huge fan of music. Played music all the time. The music industry itself just didn't attract me.
So you made your living doing things that weren't so much in the public spotlight, but what sounds like were still creative things and things that you still enjoyed. During all that time, though, was there a side of you that wanted to kind of get back out there on the stage and do what you're about to do and get back out there with Alice?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Check this out. I did an interview. It was right during this New Normal album, and like 3 or 4 years ago. And somebody said to me, all right, tell me all the bands that asked you to play with them after you left Alice. And, the number is 0, because what could I do? I weighed 230 pounds, you know what I mean? I was like this big, giant, freakish guy, who's going to, he joined Cinderella. That's not going to happen. So I'm not saying that's the only reason, but, so it's true. It's like I wanted to play. I wanted to get on stage. I wanted to do my own thing. And, of course, playing with Alice would always be an incredible thing. So that desire was always there. I had a little feeling of kind of jealousy and all that stuff. But, until the situation was correct, I really wasn't going to push it. And, some of my friends fought through that really dry period. And there's nobody more aware of that than you, where, what was it, like mid-90s, 2000, right around there. It was pretty rough out there if you wanted to play hard rock or metal, especially in the States, and that's the other thing. The thing I was talking about the audience, there's very few people that understand that better than you, because you bring the musicians to the audiences and try to give them, something, bring them closer together. And it's because you understand that the relationship is the only thing that matters in terms of keeping things going. So, I did miss that. I did miss standing in front of the audience and playing and all that stuff. More so than recording, actually.
You know, you touch on something that I think is pretty interesting. We all know that there's a lot of image that goes on with bands and what have you. So you're basically, and your image at that time was of a very, I mean, you were a bodybuilder. I mean, you were like cut, you were in unbelievable shape. It's crazy to think, but I could see this to some degree, that you looking like that and being known for a guy that looked like Rambo, that actually, you weren't this skinny guy that looked like he just got off heroin. That image is not going to work for, even though, despite your talents, we all know that comes into it. Kane, can you talk about that a little bit? Like, was that something, obviously that was another passion of yours besides music, was bodybuilding and that sort of discipline to look like that at that time? Is that what was, and do you still, I mean, I saw you 5 years ago, you still look great, but you weren't that bulked up. Where are you at now? And did you feel that back then, that kind of almost hurt you coming out of Alice a little bit?
Well, I have to tell you that Alice and I do, we share something. It's kind of an obsessive behavior. In other words, you know Alice and his feeling about golf. I mean, it's unstoppable. Yeah. You know what I mean? So he still goes out every day. He also goes to a mall every day. You know, these are the things he was doing. So I started lifting weights, and I never wanted to get into, the bodybuilding contests, and the thing I hate about gyms, I still go to them today, is I hate all the fucking mirrors. Everybody's looking around at each other. And now everybody's filming themselves. So, it just sort of happened. And then, in my own mind, I was thinking to myself, this is completely atypical to the image that's, that people want. So that was one of the things that attracted Alice to me. In other words, when they saw me, once I came down and, he actually saw me play somewhere and didn't tell anybody he was there and everything. So this guy's like a complete kind of a freak in that regard, and he can play guitar. So yeah. So, and then the other thing that came along is, Shep had this idea with this gun guitar. So,
right.
I got that. Some kid comes in, he's an Army brat, so that's what he did. He's around weapons all the time. He made this gun guitar, played amazingly well. I'll never forget, I was in the bus with Alice, and Cream magazine said something about, underrated guitar player, all that stuff that, and then they said, Kane Rambo Roberts. And I said to Alice, where are they fucking getting Rambo? And he goes, have you looked in the mirror? You know what I mean? I actually was clueless. The only thing was missing was like, a headband, So, once you step out of that realm, it's like being in a movie like Dumb and Dumber. Like, you're always going to be that guy, like Jeff Daniels is kind of stuck with that character now, every time he steps in front of the camera. So that's the way it was with me. Now, there's one story, I haven't really told anybody this, but I was at the Rainbow on Sunset. I was just hanging out, and there was a table literally with everybody, from Bret Michaels and Steve Piercy, and all, just the whole, like all these guys were there. And I was walking by, and I think it was Bret Michaels said, hey, Kane, why don't you, join us? So I sat there, and, I was sitting there, I was like going, I must look like their bodyguard. I was like this giant guy sitting there and they were all really cool, nice guys, and all that. That's the other thing is, you really can't judge anybody's personality until you meet them. You can hear things, and you can even hear things they say, but until you're sitting in front of them, you must know this better than anybody, but you're sitting in front of them, you don't know really what they're like. And, everybody was always very cool with me and stuff. So, but, I didn't fit in, and that didn't bother me at all. I just know that, like, there was one show we did in England, I think it was Wembley, and my look, I think, just sort of upset the apple cart so much with one guy. He said I wasn't really playing guitar. It was a recording. And I'm going, was he getting that? You know what I mean? That wasn't happening. So it was definitely a strange kind of a choice to look like that and the gun guitar and everything. But, I had a blast. So it was fucking awesome.
And where are we at now? Like, and I saw you probably 4 or 5 years ago. You look great. I mean, a lot of decades have gone by, but are you still that into looking like that? Or when people see you now with Alice, are you going to come out differently?
Well, it was a knee-jerk thing. Like, as soon as I got it, and I'd been training pretty hard, but I kind of got a little medieval on it. So, I'll be noticeably bigger than when you saw me, but I'm not going to come in like with a tank top or any of that. That's not the point. That's not who I am anymore anyway. So I'm just going to, it'll be evident, but it's, for me, all the hard work is going to be, getting everything in my fingers and going beyond what I've done before. So.
Speaking of that, George Lynch, there was a period of time about 20 years ago when George Lynch got super into bodybuilding, and he told me himself he also got into roids, and he really just went over the top with it. But he said one of the things that he had to stop, one of the reasons why he had to stop doing it was because it hurt the dexterity. He felt it was impacting his guitar playing. He said his forearm and his hands got so tight and from getting so muscular and getting so big that he felt that it was hurting his ability to play. Did any of that ever come into play for you as a player? Did you ever feel that similar impact from being so muscular?
It actually did start. But what I do, and I've done this for quite a while, is I really wrap my wrists and forearms. So they're almost out of the process. So I don't train my forearms or anything like that. So I'm kind of like, it's not like I have a brace on them, but it's to the point like my wrists are so wrapped that they're not really doing anything. And I understand what he's saying, and you really have to be careful of that because, when you're holding the neck, what was it? Rudy Sarzo told me that Randy Rhoads said when you're playing bass or guitar, you have to hold the pick and hold the neck like you're holding a sparrow. It has to be very delicate. So, so that's sort of the thing you have to maintain. You want to have all this musculature, especially if you want to shred it all. So, he's right. He's absolutely right. Yeah, and I do remember that period. George is one of my all-time favorite guitar players. You can actually hear it in some of my playing, his influence, because he's so good.
Speaking of playing, tell me about now as you guys get ready and you get ramped up to do this. Have you rehearsed with the band? And obviously you're going to be working with two other guitar players that I'm assuming you probably haven't played with before in Ryan Roxy and Tommy Henriksen. Alice is now a 3-guitar band. Have you worked all that out? Have you talked to those guys? Have you figured out who's going to do what? And have you talked about, and has Alice talked about, with you coming back to the band, spotlighting maybe a song or two? We all know he has a massive catalog, but maybe spotlighting a song or two from your era a little bit more, the records you made with them. Have you worked all that out yet?
Yeah, actually, one of the things that happened was when Nita joined the band, she was a big fan of the Raise Your Fist and Yell album as growing up as a kid. So when she was 2, no, I'm kidding. No, when she was younger, she was listening to those records, and she was constantly trying to get them to do The World Needs Guts and Roses on White Lace and songs like that. So they're already in the set. There's 4 songs that I wrote or was involved with. Bed of Nails, I played the solo on and stuff from the Trash album. So that stuff is already there. And basically what I'm doing is not in terms of the ensemble parts, I'm going to play Nita's parts. There's some riffs with harmonies and stuff that I have to just sort of, because, I'm walking in to a band that's been together for 8 years. But in terms of the rhythm and the riffing and soloing and stuff, I got completely, freedom to do whatever I want. So those songs are already there, Eddie. So I'm excited about it. And of course, who doesn't want to play the Alice classic songs and, some of the new stuff like Poison and everything? They're awesome songs. So, it's kind of like a Lamborghini to kind of walk into, especially since all the musicians are so good. The drums, obviously Glenn and Chuck are amazing. And, I've been listening to Ryan and Tommy a lot, and it's fucking awesome guitar players. So it's going to be kind of an easy slide to get back in there, and I think it's just going to be fun. So.
When's the first show? When will be the first show that you return to the stage with Alice Cooper? I don't know what the routing is.
September 7th. So right now I've rented a rehearsal studio, and I just go in there, and I have board mixes and stuff like that from their shows, and I just crank it and playing really loud as if I'm on stage, just to get in the right environment again. So it's working out good, and it's actually it's getting better and better every time. Because my playing has changed. I'm not exactly the same type of player as before, obviously. Influenced by a lot of what guitar players are doing over the last 20 years or whatever it is. And I think once Alice heard what I was doing on my record, he mentioned the guitar playing on that a couple of times, before he asked me to play with him. So, he knows, I'm not fucking around when it comes to the instrument. So yeah. And the other thing too is, you can imagine just how exciting it's going to be, to step on there with those guys in that show and be in front of, they got some of the best audiences I've ever seen. I think we're doing something in Kentucky called Rock Ridge or something. I might be mistaken, but it's a big festival, and that's going to be it's like the world greeting you with open legs. It's like, come back and play with Alice Cooper and let's do this. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man, there's a lot of people that are excited that you're coming back into the band. There were a lot of people like Nita and others who grew up with that period of time and seeing you in those MTV videos and stuff. And we all know Alice is super generous with the band members that he has. I mean, he gave Nita a tremendous spotlight. He gave her a lot of play in that show. He really showcased her a lot and really helped her out with her career and wherever she's going on to now. So in a way, it's going to be cool for you to come back, and I'm sure he'll do a similar thing with you because you were a big part of the history as well, and I think there's going to be a lot of fans excited to see you up there again.
Yeah, and I mean, I was kind of blown away by Anita because she brought so much to each show, and never mind. And it reminded me a little bit of what I was doing because her look is so striking. It's almost a distraction from what she's playing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm standing up there and I'm like 230 pounds, and Alice is really skinny. It's just like this big lumbering guy around there. So, people have to get past that and listen to the guitar and everything. And she was sort of met with the same thing because, she's obviously a gorgeous female, but she's a fucking, amazing guitar player. It's just, I've been listening, by the way, with headphones, and sometimes, some of the mixes, she's up in the mix because I wanted to hear what she was doing. And just killer stuff. She's really great.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's been, of course, a hallmark of Alice's entire career is having great bands as well. There's been a lot of great musicians in and out of there, and it's really cool that you're returning. So I look forward to seeing you doing your thing. One last thing, Alice related, I got to ask you, Kane, and then I'll let you go. You of course are. What's that?
I said steroids. No, I'm kidding.
Well, no. The one thing I was curious about was you of course, in addition to playing a guitar, as I said, a songwriter who co-wrote almost all those songs on that Alice Cooper record. But you also have a co-writing credit on a Kiss song that is on a Kiss record that's very well loved from the non-original band, a record called Revenge, and you co-wrote a song on that record called Take It Off. Now, I know you've got a relationship with Bob Ezrin. Is that how that came about? I always wondered how you had a song on a Kiss record.
Yeah, Bob, talk about these phone calls that come in. I'm sitting there, and Bob Ezrin said, hey, I'm writing with Paul Stanley. You want to come up and write with us? So, obviously the answer was yes. And I went there and I played a couple of things, and then I played the riff that's the beginning of Take It Off. And he went, that's it. Like, that's what Paul said. So I went up there and wrote with him 3 or 4 times. And by the way, he's all about work. He's one of those guys, like anybody that plays music. Did you ever play an instrument, Eddie?
I did not, actually. No.
Boy, that's surprising because you have like such a passion for it. But the thing is that if you're there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20, an hour, you're going to walk out with a song. It may not be done, but the work ethic is so intense. It's like that with Desmond Child as well. If you're there for 15 minutes, like sometimes we write with guys and you're there for 2 hours. People start yawning. You got a little bit of a verse done, and let's go out to lunch. These guys are like, it's full-on work, and that's sort of a little insider secret as to why Kiss is so huge. Is because whatever their image is, they're really focused, hard-working motherfuckers, you know. So I really enjoyed working with Paul. And then I saw a live version of that on YouTube of Take It Off. And, you know, I did a rock and roll fantasy camp thing, and Paul was there. And I said, your fucking vocals on that are unbelievable. And he said it was one of the greatest times for singing for him. So, you know, I was just really sort of honored that they made this huge video. They had all these strippers come out. You know, and I said to Gene, I said, really, you had these strippers out? And he said, everybody told us not to do that, so we had to, you know. So I really like those guys. They're fun. And, you know, but by the way, you know, there's a lot of controversy and stuff. Their business dealings were, you know, pristine. They were perfect. You know what I mean? We made the deal. It never changed. So yeah, I'm big fans of theirs as well. And by the way, I'm big fans of a lot of the music, you know, that of these guys that play. I'm like, you know what I mean? You know, fanboy, you know, deep down. You can't help it.
Did you ever write anything else with Kiss, Kane, that didn't make it onto a record, or was it just that when you just get together and do that one song?
Just did that one song. It was it.
Right.
I did other stuff with Ezrin. You know, I played with Rod Stewart, and yeah, I mean that was one of those things where, you know, everybody told me Rod Stewart's this and that, and then, you know, I go to the studio, and I figured Rod wouldn't be there, and I'm in the control room, and I'm looking through the glass, and I see Rod Stewart's in the singing booth, like inside the studio there. So Ezrin comes in. He goes, "Are you ready?" I said, "All right." And he said, "You're going to do a blues live with Rod Stewart." And, you know, all I can think of is, like, you know, Jeff Beck did that. You know what I mean? Like those
right.
recordings. And when that voice came through that big speaker, it was fucking unreal. So, you know, to me, those are like the sort of precious opportunities that being in the music industry offers you, you know. And any kid out there that's playing and wants to get in those situations or whatever, you know, some of the names may change. But I do believe that if you work hard enough, the world will beat a path to your door. And I'm a perfect example of that, because back in the day, the only band that ever would have called me up the way I looked is Alice Cooper, and somehow he found me, you know. So I guess I worked hard enough, you know what I mean? That sort of a thing.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, it's great to talk to you. Congratulations on being back in the band. I know I and a lot of the fans look forward to seeing it and seeing what you guys are going to do and how it's all going to come together. And it'll also take us a little bit down memory lane for all of us that grew up with MTV back in the day and remembering you and the gun guitar and all of that. It should be great. So great. Thank you so much for the time, Kane, and I wish you nothing but the best. I know you're still very much in prep mode, getting ready for this to all ramp up in a month or so, but thanks for taking some time out for me today.
Oh, always, Eddie. Anytime. Thank you.
Good to talk to you, man. All the best, and I look forward to seeing you on the road.
All right. See you there.
Take care, man. There he goes. Kane Roberts, everybody, joining us here on Trunk Nation today. Great to visit with him. Great guy. And really the first time I've ever really interviewed him, which, as he mentioned at the top of the interview, we met each other for the first time at a signing show, and that was probably 5 years ago. It was actually in New Jersey at Chiller, and we talked about doing something at that time. I know we took a photo together, which I have somewhere, and you know, I just really wasn't sure what Kane was doing musically at that time, but now we know what he's doing. He's going back to Alice Cooper, which was announced a few weeks ago with the departure of Nita Strauss. So thanks to Kane Roberts for some time there. We got